Discovered. My daughter's yell hid an incredible lesson. The food was the least of our concerns. Lucy's heart raced as she moved from one corner of the community center to another, her eyes darting between the mismatched tables overflowing with potluck dishes. Emma clung to her side, her little fingers gripping Lucy's arm tightly as though expecting the weight of the world to come crashing down at any moment. She could sense Emma's hunger, an insatiable need that transcended mere physical sustenance. Places like this should feel warm and inviting, but Lucy felt exposed, acutely aware of the judgments painted on the faces of those around her. What will I do if I can't provide for her? As a nurse, I save lives every day. But her life, my precious Emma, feels like a delicate balance on the verge of tipping over. Each bill that arrives only reminds her of the limitations she faced, the financial strain that knocked every hopeful conversation into a harsh reality. She glanced at the overflowing food, each dish a reminder of the disparity, and a silent testament to the generosity they struggled to reclaim. They didn't just need to eat, they needed something more. A cascade of muffled conversations drowned out the thoughts racing through her mind. Then, like a thunderclap shattering glass, Emma's voice erupted. "I'm so hungry!" It wasn't a plea. It was a desperate shout. Lucy froze, a flush creeping up her neck as silence swallowed the room. All eyes were now on them, and Lucy's stomach knotted. "Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue." The moment was electric with tension, revealing far more than just hunger. Lucy felt the weight of countless families in that room, each one wrestling with their own demons of insecurity. Some faces shifted uncomfortably while others exchanged knowing glances, their shared struggles suddenly bursting forth like an untamed flood. Emma's innocent outcry stripped away the pretense of politeness, unearthing emotions everyone had been too afraid to voice. Was it too much to ask for understanding? Her hands trembled slightly at her sides, her mind racing with unrest and questions echoing loudly. Am I failing her? Lucy felt her heart sink, a fierce battle of pride and fear converging. How long could she maintain this facade of motherly control? The realization loomed. So many around her masked their fears, just as she had been doing. Then Mrs. Thompson, her elderly neighbor with a voice steeped in wisdom, made her way through the crowd. "Lucy, dear, this eruption is a cry for connection, not just sustenance," she said, weaving through the undercurrents of anxiety. Lucy's heart clenched. What Mrs. Thompson suggested felt raw, an avenue both frightening and liberating. Lucy knew that if they didn't confront the truth, this moment would dissolve into another whisper of resentment, another missed opportunity to effect change. Desperation mingled with determination, urging her to push through the discomfort. Emma's outburst had stirred something in her, a desire to rip off the band-aid of silence, to be seen, to forge real connections that mattered. But would that come at a cost too high to bear? The room's tension sat heavy, and she felt the ground quaking beneath her, a fracture in their social fabric waiting to cascade uncontrollably. Could she and Emma weather this storm? New feelings fought for dominance as Lucy's dread spiraled higher, darker truth just beyond the horizon. What lurked in her past? Would these judgments, these whispers of perception, ultimately define them? With her emotions churning, Lucy grappled with not only the struggles of each day, but the haunting weight of a secret she had shielded from Emma, one that threatened to unravel everything they had begun to build. The taste of uncertainty lingered in her mouth as she let out a shaky breath, preparing to step into unknown territory, fully aware of what might be lost if she couldn't find the strength to move forward. Would love be enough? The silence stretched around them, a taut string ready to snap. Lucy's eyes flitted from the puzzled gazes of their neighbors back to Emma, whose face was a mixture of hunger and confusion. That simple truth of her daughter's need, the unfiltered honesty that cut through the pretense of embarrassment, ignited something deep within Lucy. "Emma," she began, her voice firm yet gentle, as she knelt to meet her daughter's gaze. "Let's get something to eat." She knew this was about more than food. It was about breaking through the barrier that had kept her locked in isolation. They needed to have this moment of vulnerability, to tap into the rawness of their existence rather than shy away from it. As Lucy led Emma toward the assortment of dishes, she felt a whirlwind of emotions. The moment Emma had shouted, Lucy had anticipated the judgment, the finger-pointing, but instead she found a rare clarity. The truth of their situation was laid bare now. The hunger echoed in more ways than the physical. They all craved connection in a world that often cloaked itself in shame and silence. With each step, Lucy felt empowered. She moved toward the table, selecting a plate and filling it with spicy cornbread, creamy potato salad, and tender barbecue chicken. Emma's eyes sparkled as Lucy handed her a heaping portion, and for the first time that evening, Lucy felt resilient. The burden that had weighed her down was beginning to lift. Perhaps admitting they needed help wasn't a sign of failure, yet self-doubt crept in again, whispering dark thoughts that hung heavily in the air. What would her colleagues at the hospital think if they knew she was here, participating in this? Would they see her as competent, or merely overwhelmed? The sting of criticism felt too sharp, yet it was dulled by the warmth of Emma's smile, which held an unyielding, innocent hope. "Look at all the food, Mummy," Emma remarked with her mouth half full, her words punctuated by an enthusiastic twirl. "Do you think everyone made this for us?" "Maybe they did," Lucy replied, the hint of a smile breaking through her earlier tension. She realized this was more profound than a meal. It represented community, support, and resilience. Slowly, the understanding settled in. The food could be physical sustenance, but the connections created between those who shared it were the real nourishment they desperately sought. Then a voice behind her beckoned, breaking her reverie. It was Mrs. Thompson again, her trademark knit scarf draped lovingly around her shoulders. "Lucy, I've been thinking," she said, her tone fraught with an unexpected gravity. "You have a gift for caring for others. You can share that gift. Have you ever thought about hosting a cooking class for families like ours? Helpful skills, shared experiences. It could forge connections in ways we can't imagine right now." The idea took root in Lucy's mind, a spark igniting possibility. Could she use her skills to empower others while confronting her own fears? Building confidence through vulnerability was a lesson she had sorely overlooked. Yet, doubt lingered. Was this merely a noble fantasy? A distraction from the chaos of her own life? But might it also be her salvation? Lucy looked down at Emma, who was eagerly munching on her food, eyes bright with curiosity. This was her anchor, the reason to propel herself beyond the familiar grips of self-doubt and anxiety. Here was an opportunity to rise, to embrace the vulnerability that had initially terrified her, to transform it into something meaningful. As her mind raced with the possibilities of connection, hope intertwined with fear, she sensed a new path unfurling ahead. But it was precarious. The next step would require confronting lingering issues with her own past. But perhaps this venture could ignite change, not just for her, but for Emma and others searching for a sense of belonging. What could she reveal to the world that might also grant her freedom from the shadows of doubt? Would she dare to step into the light? Lucy stood at the makeshift table, her instincts grappling with a sudden pull toward an uncharted territory she had long avoided. The idea of a cooking class buzzed in her mind like a stubborn fly. With every moment spent contemplating it, the vision of her standing before a group of eager faces made her heart race, both from thrill and trepidation. "Mommy, can we make cookies tomorrow?" Emma's innocent question anchored Lucy back into the present. She glanced down at her daughter, whose excitement was palpable. It was moments like these that unsettled her. The joy radiating from Emma contrasted starkly with the whirlwind of anxiety swirling within her. "Yes, if you help," Lucy replied, trying to summon enthusiasm. But the thought of volunteering for a cooking class weighed heavily. What if she couldn't handle the responsibility? The nagging questions scuttled in her mind. And yet, there was a spark of excitement she was desperate to feed. What if she embraced this challenge instead of retreating? She was no stranger to managing chaos. After all, she worked in an emergency room where split-second decisions were the norm. Why should hosting something as simple as a cooking class feel any more daunting? Perhaps it was because this was personal, open to judgment and criticism from others, and the concept of vulnerability felt foreign and uncomfortable. Returning home with Emma, Lucy's thoughts ran wild. The kitchen was not just a culinary space, it was a realm where intimacy thrived. She envisioned the smiles exchanged as children stirred batter, and the laughter that would echo as families shared stories over simmering pots. Was this not the very essence of nurturing, both for herself and the community she had distanced herself from? But then doubt gnawed at her resolve. What if the community dismissed her? What if her own inadequacies shone brightly under the scrutiny of others? In her reflective solitude later that night, she found herself in front of the computer, hesitating to draft an outline for her potential class. The cursor blinked like a heartbeat. With a deep breath, she began to write. The words flowed slowly at first. Introduction, objectives, recipes. Each sentence became a confrontation with her fears, but it also signified a tiny act of defiance against the shadows that often crippled her. As the outline took shape, Lucy's chest tightened. She envisioned what it would be like to stand before a group of mothers and fathers, anxious yet hopeful. They would likely share her fears of inadequacy. Would she be able to guide them through something more profound than cooking? Could she further break the chains of isolation that seemed to bind them all? Suddenly, she recalled Mrs. Thompson's words. Sharing a gift. But was her gift enough, and could it create ripples of change? The prospect of connection beckoned like a lighthouse in the fog, a beacon of hope, yet also a reminder of the risks she would have to embrace. Determination flickered within her. Perhaps this venture wasn't merely about the food. It was about building bridges between fractured lives. As she closed her laptop, Lucy realized she was at a fundamental crossroads. Would she seize the opportunity to share her struggles and strengths? Or would she retreat back into the comfortable shadows? The silence of her home felt heavy with expectation, as if the walls were holding their breath, waiting for her decision. Tomorrow would be pivotal. Would she step into this new role, confront her insecurities, and embrace the journey ahead? The alarm of self-doubt rang in her ears, but she also felt embers of hope flickering against the darkness. Was she ready to face what was both exhilarating and terrifying? The chance to not only change her story, but those of others as well. Waking up tomorrow might bring more than just dawn. It might usher in a new chapter filled with risks and revelations. Would Lucy have the courage to take that leap of faith? The morning sun streamed into Lucy's kitchen, casting a warm golden hue over the countertops. Yet it felt cold against her skin. She stood before the window, staring into her backyard, where Emma happily plucked at the grass, lost in her own world. The stark contrast between her daughter's carefree innocence and the heavy mantle of expectation resting on Lucy's shoulders set her heart racing. Today was the day. She had promised Emma they would bake cookies, but the ghost of the cooking class loomed larger than just baked goods. As Lucy looked down at her notebook filled with sketches of recipes and lesson plans, a tightening in her chest made her wonder if she could really do this. All the mental rehearsals hadn't quite prepared her for the reality of standing in front of a group, talking about what felt like an intimate part of herself, With her pulse quickening, she decided to accompany Emma on their baking adventure, if only as a trial run to buck up her confidence. Flour would dust their clothes, chocolate chips would scatter across the floor. But within this messiness lay the seeds of their shared experience, something she yearned for, yet frightened of embracing. "Mommy, can I stir?" Emma's bright eyes lit up with hope, her smile widening. In that moment, Lucy felt the walls of self-doubt begin to crack. "Of course, sweetheart. Let's make the best cookies." Engaging in the rhythmic motion of mixing ingredients, Lucy began to feel the tightness ease. The act of creating something together, the joy of laughter, and the sweet aroma of cookie dough being shaped into little rounds made her heart swell with unexpected warmth. For the first time she realized that the journey of cooking together was not just about the food itself. It was the bonding, the connection, the narrative being woven in each stir of the bowl. While Emma expertly maneuvered the spatula, Lucy found herself plotting anew, her mind racing with possibilities for her cooking class. Perhaps she could enhance the experience of crafting beyond just culinary techniques by integrating stories, memories, and the significance of each recipe. Could she help others find comfort and connection in shared culinary history? But what if they questioned her authenticity? What if she was exposed, standing in front of a crowd that could dissect her every move? Discomfort curled back into her mind, but she pushed it down, recognizing it for what it was. A challenge, an opportunity to face the ghost that had haunted her for far too long. "Mommy, look! I made a heart!" Emma exclaimed, shaping the dough in an adorable form. "For you." It was a simple gesture that unraveled Lucy's breath. Love, symbolized in flour and sugar, had transformed into something more meaningful. Caught in this moment of vulnerability, Lucy felt a bolt of clarity. This class wasn't just for her. It was for Emma, for their shared experiences, and for families like theirs. It was about creating a space where others could be brave enough to drop their own walls, and maybe, just maybe, catch glimpses of their own light. As the cookies baked in the oven, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in the stainless steel. There were lines drawn by worry, but behind them was also a resolute spark that hadn't flickered out completely. She realized that every inch of her hesitation was simply her instinct channeling fear away from the unknown, yet invigorating her with a newfound clarity of purpose. Stepping into uncertainty could lead to something beautiful, and she could no longer afford to shy away. By the time the fragrant cookies were pulled from the oven, Lucy was no longer the hesitant woman she had wakened as. She was evolving. She was redefining not just what it meant to cook, but also what it meant to live fully and connect deeply. With Emma dancing around, waiting eagerly for a taste, Lucy thought of the moment ahead when she would put herself out there, possibly facing rejection, but also the chance for transformation. Now, her next step loomed. How would she gather her courage to share her vision of connection through cooking? And more importantly, what would she do if the very act of sharing her gift drew her out of her comfort zone and into genuine acceptance? The weight of anticipation hung in the air, as tantalizing as the sweet cookies that beckoned for attention. Would Lucy find the fortitude to address her fears head-on? Or would she falter as the moment of truth drew near? Only time would tell. Lucy's hands trembled slightly as she pulled the cookies from the oven, their golden brown edges crisp and inviting. She allowed herself a moment of indulgence, inhaling the sweet aroma that filled the kitchen. It was a small victory, but one that felt monumental in the context of her evolving identity. Each warm cookie represented not just a recipe perfected, but a step toward understanding what it would mean to stand before others, vulnerable yet resolute. "Mommy, can we give some to the neighbors?" Emma asked, her face alight with the kind of enthusiasm that only a child could possess. Lucy hesitated, caught between the fluttering excitement and the sudden wave of self-doubt that crashed upon her. Sharing their creation was a tangible act of connection, one that symbolized the community Lucy yearned to build through her cooking class. But there was something deeper lurking within her reluctance. What if they don't like them? She whispered, more to herself than to Emma. Then we'll make more, Emma declared, her confidence unshaken. Lucy chuckled, momentarily pushed past her fears by her daughter's unwavering belief. Perhaps this was where the lesson lay. Not just in the act of cooking and sharing, but also in embracing the uncertainty that accompanied creativity. What mattered more, she realized, was the act of connection itself, not the perfection of the cookies. With determination rising in her chest, she nodded. "Let's share," she said, pulling out a colorful plate and carefully arranging the cookies atop it. Their small community was dotted with neighbors who had their problems and joys, just like them, and Lucy suddenly felt an urge to bridge the gap that had woven itself tightly over the years. Each cookie leaving her home wouldn't just be a delicious treat. It would be an invitation to connect. As they walked next door, Lucy's heart pounded in her chest. What if the neighbors questioned her abilities? What if they dismissed her initiatives as trivial? But just as Emma had stepped into the kitchen believing they would create something beautiful, Lucy took a deep breath, allowing herself to be buoyed by hope. They knocked on the door, and as it creaked open, Mrs. Thompson, a kindly older woman with a welcoming smile, stood before them. "Well, aren't you two a sight for sore eyes?" she exclaimed, her gaze traveling down to the plate in Lucy's hands. "What do we have here?" "Cookies, Mrs. Thompson. We made them together," Emma chirped, her voice sparkling with pride. Lucy's pulse raced as Mrs. Thompson's eyes widened in delight. "How wonderful! You know, I could use a little sweetness in my day." With that simple acceptance, Lucy felt the walls of her self-doubt begin to crumble further. It was in this interaction, so casual yet meaningful, that she began to unlock her understanding of what it truly meant to share. As they exchanged sweet bites and laughter, Lucy realized these moments were the cornerstone of her desire to teach others. If she could instill just a fraction of the joy she felt at that moment in her cooking class, perhaps she could help others find solace in similar connections. Later, as she and Emma walked home, Lucy contemplated what this newfound courage meant for her upcoming class. She no longer viewed her endeavor as simply passing on culinary tips, but as an opportunity to create an atmosphere where emotions could be shared alongside recipes. She found herself questioning everything again, her mind swirling with newfound ambitions. Would sharing her own vulnerabilities through cooking help others unleash their creativity? And how might that influence the dynamics of relationships within her community? The evening air felt electric, charged with possibility as they entered their kitchen once more. "Let's make something different tomorrow. Something we can create together," Lucy suggested, inspired, but the flicker of her excitement was quickly overshadowed by a wave of apprehension. Tomorrow would be another opportunity to open herself up, to craft not just culinary delights, but emotional experiences. As she tucked Emma in for the night, the weight of what lay ahead pressed heavier than ever. Would she have the strength to embrace her vision? Or would fear once again hold her back, just as it had all those years before? The moment of truth was fast approaching, and Lucy found herself standing on the very edge of her own potential. Would she seize the opportunity to transform her fears into a source of strength? Or would she shrink away from the challenge that lay ahead? The morning sun spilled through the kitchen window, casting a warm glow over the countertop. Lucy stood at the helm, surrounded by the ingredients for the new project she'd envisioned with Emma. Today, she was ready to make homemade pasta, a process that felt both daunting and exhilarating. The thought of kneading the dough brought a giddy flutter to her stomach, blending anticipation with the familiar flavor of anxiety. "Mommy, look!" Emma shouted, tugging at Lucy's apron while she attempted to measure flour. "Can I help?" Lucy smiled at her daughter's eagerness, but felt a familiar tug of insecurity. Would she succeed in this? This was more than just cooking. It was a lesson in courage, not only for herself, but also for Emma. She swallowed hard. "Of course, sweetheart. But you have to promise to follow my instructions carefully." As they began the process, the toil of mixing flour and eggs transformed her nervousness into a resolute focus. Each motion felt like a quiet confrontation against the doubts residing in her mind. She guided Emma's hands, her own layered with flour and hinting at the newfound confidence she'd begun to cultivate. But as Emma valiantly tried to roll out the dough, a loud thud echoed in the kitchen as the rolling pin slipped from her grasp, sending flour flying. Lucy winced as she processed the mess. This was not just a culinary endeavor. It was a stage where she felt scrutinized by her own expectations. "What if it's ruined?" Lucy mumbled as she surveyed the chaotic countertop, measuring her anxiety against her and Emma's excitement. "Then we'll clean it up," Emma exclaimed, her spirit unbroken. The child's resilience struck a chord deep within Lucy, illuminating a painful memory. Moments in her past when she had let negativity spin her into a web of inaction. The cobwebs of fear thickened around her, but here was Emma, ushering in the light of hope with her unwavering optimism. Lucy took a deep breath, letting exhilaration replace fear. "You're right. Let's clean it up, then we'll start again." The acceptance of imperfection felt liberating. Their laughter echoed through the kitchen as they scraped flour into a bowl, a tangible reminder that mistakes could be transformed into new beginnings. With renewed energy, they started again, embracing each step of the process as a shared journey. "See that? That's a great pasta shape," she cheered when Emma rolled out the dough successfully on the second attempt. They cheered together, and in that moment, Lucy understood that cooking was about connection, not competence. It was about the joy of building something together, a lesson she was finally ready to embrace. But as they continued to create, Lucy couldn't shake the weight of expectation. What if this approach failed? Would the classmates she intended to teach embrace vulnerability the same way Emma had? The echoes of doubt murmured in the back of her mind, reverberating against the walls of confidence she was slowly constructing. By the time the pasta was hung to dry, exhaustion mingled with a triumph unique to this personal journey. Every bit of flour spattered across the kitchen was no longer a mark of inadequacy. Instead, it symbolized resilience, growth, and the joy of sharing love through cooking. Later that evening, as Lucy sat at the table wrapping leftovers, a thought circled her mind relentlessly. This class she was preparing for could either cement her identity as a teacher or reveal further insecurities. Would she dare dismantle the walls she's erected? Would exposing her journey resonate, invite others in, and build connections, as the cookies had done with Mrs. Thompson? And just like that, Lucy realized the stakes weren't just about cooking. They were about forging bonds that could potentially transform lives. The decision loomed, casting long shadows over her thoughts. Would she take the leap and share this process with others? Would vulnerability shift the narrative, opening doors to heart connections that she yearned for? As the clock ticked on, Lucy felt the magnitude of what lay ahead. Tomorrow held the promise of new beginnings, and daunting fears entwined like the strands of pasta they had made. The moment to decide was drawing closer. Would she seize it? Or would this be another escapade buried under layers of self-doubt? The realization hung heavily in the air, propelling her thoughts forward. Even as excitement gleamed in her heart, a question echoed. What if this class was less about teaching cooking skills, and more about facing the music of her own insecurities? The next morning the sun rose higher and brighter than usual, illuminating Lucy's kitchen in a way that felt almost magical. But despite the warmth radiating through the window, a chill of trepidation lingered deep within her. Today marked the first day of her class. By midday, she would be standing in front of a group of eager faces, ready to teach them the very dish she and Emma had made together. Yet the joy of baking had melted into anxiety. What if she derived more solace in past mistakes than in sharing growth? As she stirred coffee in her favorite mug, her thoughts buzzed with questions. Could she really share the lessons her daughter had unwittingly imparted? Would her vulnerability resonate with others, or would it expose her shortcomings instead? She pressed her hands against the countertop, grounding herself against a tidal wave of uncertainty. Today's the day, she whispered to herself. Each pulse of adrenaline surged with a mixture of excitement and dread as she prepared the paste for their class. The ingredients lay before her, not unlike the emotional components of her own journey. Fragile, yet full of potential. There was flour, eggs, and water. All fundamental yet disparate, much like the disparate pieces of her conflicted identity. As she measured each ingredient, Lucy reflected on her past experiences. She remembered how she let nerves dictate her actions, and how those insecurities had often derailed her ambitions. Cooking had always served as her sanctuary, yet here she was, preparing not just a dish, but a testament to her resilience and growth. Would it hold the weight she hoped it would? Once in the classroom, the familiar stir of chatter washed over her. She set up the room with a blend of everything she loved about cooking. A lightness from the bright colors of fresh vegetables, the inviting scent of herbs, and a warm atmosphere that begged for connections. Taking a deep breath, she turned to face the eager eyes of her students. "Welcome, I'm Lucy, and today we'll be making homemade pasta," she began, her voice a touch shaky. But as she spoke, a steady rhythm formed. Sharing her journey felt liberating and daunting all at once, but she pressed on, letting the words flow. She told them about the struggle and the joy of the previous day, the flour-covered countertop, and Emma's laughter amidst chaos. It wasn't just about cooking. It was about embracing imperfections. With each step in the pasta-making process, Lucy watched her students follow suit. Their enthusiasm mirrored the same glee she had shared with Emma. Yet there lingered that edge of doubt, whispering incessantly. What if their excitement faded once the class ended? Would they reflect on her words with indifference? Then came the moment of truth, a demonstration of kneading dough. As she guided them through the motions, she felt a familiar warmth rising within her. The soft, pliable dough connected their hands, infusing the room with laughter and a sense of camaraderie. Each raised eyebrow and mischievous grin reminded her of Emma and their shared struggles. She realized that her audience, much like Emma, yearned for connection, acceptance, and vulnerability. As they finished crafting their pasta and set it to boil, a powerful realization coursed through her. The act of teaching wasn't merely about skill transfer, it was about connection and shared experiences, bridging vulnerabilities with laughter. The recognition crashed in like waves. This class could become a place for growth for everyone, including her. At that moment, as she surveyed the faces of her students, Lucy decided to dive deeper into her own journey, embracing true openness. She could be the narrative and the storyteller both. Fear transformed into determination. It wouldn't merely be about food. It was about sharing passions, vulnerabilities, and the strength found in moments of confusion. As she wrapped up the class, Lucy felt a surge of exhilaration. She had faced the specter of her insecurities head-on, and now stood more whole and connected than she had ever imagined. But as laughter echoed off the walls, a new doubt crept in. How far could this newfound resolve carry her? Shipping culinary knowledge felt natural now, but forthcoming heart-sharing could be the ultimate test. Yet, it was far from over. The class was a success, but Lucy knew she was about to confront an even greater challenge. Would she open herself up to sharing her journey again, further inviting others to explore their own vulnerabilities? The echoes of apprehension persisted, leaving each student's departure stirring a complex mix of triumph and trepidation. The moment for further decisions was near. What awaited her in the classroom next should shape not only her identity, but also the bonds she longed to fortify through shared experiences. As she cleaned up, a thought gripped her mind with urgency. If her heart yearned for connection, how could she resist the pull for deeper sincerity? Lucy woke the next morning with rays of sunlight spilling across her quilt, a stark contrast to the restlessness that had plagued her through the night. Despite the physical remnants of success she felt in her chest from yesterday's class, the realization that vulnerability had become her raw armor echoed louder than the morning birds outside. She couldn't shake off the flickering doubt. Had she truly connected with her students, or merely entertained them with her culinary skills? As she brewed her coffee, she wrestled with the thought of her next lesson. Perhaps she could do more than just share a recipe. What would happen if she allowed her students into the deepest corners of her experiences? Those fortified walls built through loss and joy. The idea both exhilarated and terrified her. Teaching as a means to connect was one thing, but dredging through the depths of personal sorrow with her students felt like a gamble. A gamble she longed to take. Determined, Lucy set about her day with fresh vigor. The ingredients she would use became symbols, every flower speck, every egg a nuance of her story. While the pasta served as a catalyst for creativity, she was beginning to recognize that her role went beyond culinary guidance. She could be a compass finding its true north through shared human experience. She pictured herself in front of the eager eyes again, this time armed with the tales of her journey. When she arrived at the classroom, the familiar buzz of energy reignited something inside her. The utensils gleamed under the soft overhead lights, quietly embracing the space. She looked at her students, a diverse tapestry of individuals, their smiles fueled with anticipation. Could they handle the deeper layers she was considering? Today we're going to explore not just pasta, but the stories that shape how we cook. She began, her voice firming, no longer trembling. She told them about Emma, weaving in anecdotes that illuminated struggles and triumphs associated with food. She revealed how every dish was steeped in memories, those once merely bittersweet reflections now morphing into a shared narrative of resilience. The students listened intently, tears glistening in a few eyes as she spoke candidly about holiday dinners filled with laughter and silent moments of longing. Each roll of dough, each cut of fresh basil, became not just an ingredient, but part of a living story, a canvas for their thoughts, fears, and hopes. They didn't just learn how to cook, they began to taste the essence of humanity in the act, igniting something profound that connected them all. However, this unfolding intimacy brought its own set of challenges. As the stories emerged, Lucy felt vulnerability rising to a steep crescendo within her chest. Not every laugh morphed into an uplifting moment, and not every memory was one she cherished. Facing her past head-on while inviting others to do the same stirred a storm of unease. What if they misjudged her openness? What if her students saw her not as a teacher but as someone lost in her own sorrow? The class continued forward, the air thick with understanding. Yet she noticed one student sitting slightly apart, an expression solely her own. Discomfort writ large on their face. At first, Lucy's heart quickened. Was this student's judgment a reflection of her own vulnerability? As she maintained eye contact, Lucy realized she had a choice. She could recoil or lean into this moment of discontent. The student's transformation from distant observer to active participant could ignite revelations that shaped them all. With careful intention, she approached the student, navigating through shared stories of apprehension. "What's holding you back?" she asked, her voice gentle but probing. In a world that wagged its finger at vulnerability, she realized she was inviting not only her audience to dive deeper, but also herself. As the students slowly began revealing their hesitations, Lucy felt an energy shift within the class. The intricate web of connections was growing stronger, but with it came the weight of expectations. Were they all prepared for the revelations that might unfold in the days ahead? As the class concluded, she sensed that this journey was only beginning. The threads of her heart, wove into each dish, could lead them into uncharted depths of self-understanding. Yet, with the looming truths uncovered, she wondered, would the classroom transform into a refuge that challenged them to confront their personal challenges together? Or would it unravel the very fabric of their shared experience? The air hung heavy with unanswered questions. Tomorrow was not simply another day. It held the keys to deeper bonds, but also potential heartbreak. Lucy stood with her arms extended, a silent acknowledgement of what lay ahead. A moment fraught with uncertainty and rich with the promise of growth. But her heart pulsed with a singular question. Would she be brave enough to face whatever truth awaited her? Lucy awoke the next morning with the lingering echoes of yesterday's revelations still dancing in her mind. The sunlight poured through her kitchen window, illuminating the scattered flour and cracked eggshells from the previous day's lesson. She felt an uncomfortable weight pressing on her chest, the anticipation of what lay ahead clashing with her innate fear of inadequacy. Each ripple of doubt reminded her that this was uncharted territory, revealing not just culinary skills, but her raw, unfiltered self. As she sipped her coffee, a new idea began to form. Rather than merely digging into her past, perhaps she could create a safe space for her students to explore their own stories. Wasn't the heart of cooking about sharing, connecting, and understanding each other? Food had a unique ability to transcend boundaries, and with it, she could spark more than just professional growth. She could inspire personal transformations. When she arrived at the classroom that day, the charged energy among her students felt almost tangible. Lucy cleared her throat, feeling a mix of excitement and trepidation, and spoke earnestly. Today, we will cook together, but we will also share our fears, our struggles, and our dreams. Just like pasta dough needs to be kneaded, our hearts need to be worked on. The students nodded, and she could see the curiosity written across their faces. As she guided them through each step, she shared not just techniques, but also questions that lingered in her mind. What does food mean to you? She prodded. What memory does it bring up? Her heart raced with vulnerability as she looked into their eyes, searching for reflections of her own hesitance. As they began preparing a simple marinara sauce, she shared stories of her childhood. How her mother's hands would flutter over tomatoes and basil, creating meals that always felt like love served in bowls. She let her stories become a bridge, inviting her students to cross over to a safer ground, revealing their own histories imbued in the simple act of cooking. The classroom transformed as they connected through shared laughter and tears, overcoming barriers they didn't even realize existed. But as some students flourished, others remained tethered by invisible chains. One girl in particular, Maggie, stood out for her silence, her face a canvas painted with uncertainty. Lucy noted her eyes, shadowed with something unspoken, and felt the urge to reach out. "Maggie, what are you thinking?" she gently coaxed, leaning closer to create an inviting bubble around them. "I don't know if my memories matter," Maggie whispered, her voice barely above a murmur. A ripple of recognition washed over Lucy. How often had she brushed aside her own troubles, deeming them irrelevant? "No memory is too small or unimportant," Lucy replied firmly, drawn into Maggie's vulnerability. "Your story is uniquely yours. It deserves to be shared." The room fell silent as Maggie's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, the facade cracking just enough to let a glimpse of her feelings shine through. Lucy could feel the tension rearing up, the pressure of expectations, not just from her students, but also from herself. They were digging into uncharted waters, and that brought not only potential for healing, but the risk of unveiling regret, fear, and confrontation with buried emotions she had long struggled to acknowledge. By the end of the class, a palpable shift had occurred. They weren't just preparing a meal. They were forging connections that could shape their identities. Yet, as the session concluded, Lucy was left with a question hanging in the air, a persistent echo gripping her heart. Was she ready to confront the flood of emotions that her students had unearthed? Would she be able to navigate the complexities of her own story, while helping them weave theirs into the fabric of cooking? The truth was about to surface, and with it came the recognition that her own journey was still far from complete. Tomorrow promised new challenges. The weight of shared stories could either unite them or pull them apart. Lucy took a deep breath, gripping the edge of the table, her resolve strengthening. She was ready to step into the unknown, but would her courage be enough to embrace the unfolding chaos, or would it prove to be her undoing? The dawn light filtering through the kitchen window signaled a fresh beginning for Lucy. Today was not just another cooking class. It was a culmination of her journey towards authenticity, one that was enriched by shared vulnerability. The weight of yesterday's struggles lingered in her heart, but now felt less like a burden and more like a badge of honor. She had invited her students to not only learn about food, but also to delve into the complexities of their own stories, thus creating a space where growth could blossom. As she prepared for class, Lucy reflected on the profound connections that had formed. It struck her that the kitchen was more than just a place to cook. It was a crucible of transformation, where the raw ingredients of life came together to create something beautiful. Her vision to foster a community built on shared experiences was beginning to take shape. Each recipe they crafted wasn't merely about technique. It echoed the laughter, tears, and stories exchanged amidst the simmering pots and sizzling pans. Arriving at the classroom, she felt a rush of excitement mixed with a hint of nerves. Today, she would encourage her students to dig even deeper. She had decided to integrate an open-floor sharing session, an opportunity for each participant to articulate their food memories and their emotional significance. "Good morning, everyone. Today we're diving deeper into the past," Lucy announced, her voice steady and inviting. "I want each of you to think about a dish that has a story behind it, one that evokes a memory, a lesson, or a moment you'd like to share. Fear not. This is a safe space to explore our most cherished and vulnerable experiences." The eager eyes of her students sparkled with curiosity, and some shifted nervously in their seats. Even those apprehensive glances reassured her that they were ready to embark on this shared journey. With the classroom set and anticipation enveloping the air, she initiated the cooking process, expertly guiding them through the creation of a comforting lasagna. Layered, complex, and rich, much like their own stories. As they constructed their dishes, she prompted them to speak about their food memories. At first, stories trickled out cautiously. One student spoke about Sunday dinners at his grandmother's house, tears welling in his eyes as he recounted her warm smile and fragrant sauce simmering on the stove. Another shared how baking cookies helped her cope with the loss of a loved one, the act of mixing and measuring becoming a therapeutic ritual. Each story resonated, weaving an intricate tapestry of human experience. Yet, as they collectively opened up, Lucy's gaze landed on Maggie, who sat still, her gaze fixed on the cutting board, a mixture of longing and apprehension washing over her features. Lucy's heart raced. She understood that behind Maggie's hesitance lay a treasure trove of unexpressed emotions waiting to be liberated. "Maggie, would you like to share?" Lucy gently prompted, stepping closer and lowering her voice to a comforting whisper. Maggie blinked, vulnerability cutting through her defenses. I guess I always felt like food wasn't something special for me. It was just what we had," she started, her voice barely rising above a murmur. In that moment, Lucy felt a wave of determination. "But food has a story. It's a reflection of love and connection, just like the pasta we're creating together," she encouraged, her tone unwavering, inviting Maggie's voice to rise against the backdrop of shared truths. Maggie hesitated, but then took a breath, revealing a long-held memory of her mother making simple vegetable soup on cold nights, the aromas wrapping around them in a cocoon of warmth. "It wasn't fancy, just what was on hand, but I felt loved." As those words fell from her lips, Lucy sensed a shift. The heavy chains of doubt began to dissolve. the air now charged with understanding and acceptance. With the lunch bells chiming, Lucy prepared to serve the finished lasagnas. But before they dug in, she invited everyone to gather in a circle. Today, we forged connections in our cooking, but now it's time to celebrate our stories. Let's raise our plates, not just to share a meal, but to acknowledge each other's journeys. As they gathered together, Lucy felt an overwhelming sense of pride. This was what she sought to create. Not just a cooking class, but a sanctuary for those ready to expose their truths. Battling through fears and self-doubt was a feat worth celebrating. Dinner commenced with laughter and conversations that ebbed and flowed between them. Each bite of the lasagna was more than nourishment. It was a joyous declaration of camaraderie. She looked around, watching students nod with understanding, their stories layering over each other like the pasta melded with sauce. As the class came to a lively close, Maggie approached Lucy, her eyes bright with newfound confidence. "Thank you for helping me find my voice," she said, emotions bubbling in her words. Lucy felt a warmth radiate through her. She had shared her own vulnerability and, in turn, empowered others to do the same. Walking home, Lucy felt lighter than she had in years. She had not only created a moment of connection through cooking, but had also stripped away layers of insecurity and fear. Reflecting on her growth, she realized she was no longer the hesitant woman who entered the community center months ago. She was becoming a beacon for others, a reminder that vulnerability could break down walls and forge powerful connections. Arriving home, Lucy made a decision. As she tucked Emma into bed that night, she promised herself to not only continue this class, but to expand it further, crafting new ways to share their stories through food and create an enduring communal experience. For the first time, Lucy felt a surge of clarity. She knew she was meant to lead this journey, nurturing not only her own growth, but also the blossoming of every person who entered her kitchen. With her heart full and resolve renewed, Lucy drifted off into a peaceful sleep, confident in her capable abilities to create change and forge deeper bonds through the universal language of food. Tomorrow would welcome new stories, connections, and perhaps an even greater understanding of what it means to truly save a life. One dish at a time. Now, dear friends, if you've witnessed Lucy's remarkable journey of growth and transformation, you need to subscribe now to our channel. Don't let these exclusive emotional stories slip away. This is the moment to show your support. Make sure to leave a like now to feed the algorithm and keep these heartfelt narratives alive for all to see. Comment your thoughts, reactions, and theories about Lucy's journey. We want to hear from you. And please, share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who you know need to feel inspired by stories of personal overcoming. Don't wait, even one more second. Join our community of true fans. Your engagement keeps this message alive and thriving.